Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and we are back with episode 64 of the Jackson Rudolph podcast, brought to you by the one and only, the legendary Black Belt Magazine. And once again, like I say every week, I am extremely excited for our guest today because we have Mr. Marty Eubanks, son of legendary promoter Ken Eubanks, and he's also a legendary point fighter. He now promotes the tournament himself. So we're going to dive into all the details of his martial arts training, his career, both as a competitor, as a promoter, always being a great advocate for sport karate, helping tournaments across the country happen through judging and bringing out his team from his school. He's also a successful school owner. So we've got somebody on the show today that has been successful in so many different areas of the martial arts world. It's not even funny. Mr. Eubanks, it is an honor to have you on the show, sir. And for our Black Belt Magazine audience here, why don't you just start with a little bit of a self-introduction and how this whole martial arts journey started for you?
Wow. Good morning, everybody. I'm Marty Eubanks, and my martial arts journey began when my dad said, we're going to the karate school and we're going to start karate. And I was just naive enough to say, count me in, getting your dad's time and being able to fight as a kid, especially back in the 70s, it's all in. But, I started, the first little karate school he had was at Western Craft in Elmhurst, Illinois. He would lay cardboard boxes down on Saturday in the floor, and all the people's kids would come and people would come and just take karate. One big class with cardboard in the middle of the Western Craft area. And then, he had a school there, but it was just a partner in school in Arlington Heights, Illinois on Rand Road, 2317 Rand Road. And I still remember the phone number at that, but, you don't remember many phone numbers. But we started back just doing it as he started way before I did. But, in 1971 was my journey. And I started off at Arlington Heights, Illinois, at one of Ken Newson's Olympic karate schools. George Hernandez was the owner, and there was Bill Josetis and Mike McNamara and Frank Sasso. All these guys own their own Olympic karate schools. It was pretty cool, and that's how it started, man. Just my dad saying, "Hey, we're going to do karate."
Yes, sir. That's awesome. And as many, this is a sport karate podcast, so as a lot of the viewers are going to know, you would go on to have a great competitive career. So let's talk about the start of that competition journey, because especially in the modern era, a lot of competitors come from traditional schools that maybe don't support competition. They find out about a tournament and then they just kind of do it on their own, right? So you were very fortunate to have someone who was in the tournament world like your father. Was it always that way? Were you guys always kind of competition focused, or did that come later?
That came later. In the 70s, we only went to a handful of tournaments. The AKA Nationals was my first national tournament. And that was back in like 75 or 76, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, Jose Gonzalez and Mike McNamara and Flim Evans and some of those guys that were the wave payers, they paved the way for us in sport karate and kept it going all these years. But that was my first national tournament. But no, we didn't. When we moved here to Kentucky in 78, that's when we started the Olympic Karate School here. And 43 years later, I'm still doing it in the same town. And that's awesome. People wonder, it's not social media. It's not some big advertisement. I just teach good traditional karate and be in business for 43 years. That's a great thing. And that's one thing that's unique because it can't be duplicated, because that's what I do. That's one thing he taught me, is be passionate and love what you do.
Absolutely. That's a great message. And we're going to get into some of those great lessons that I'm sure that he taught you along the way. So now I'm going to let you brag a little bit, because anybody that's watching this after the show, you can go on YouTube, you can find the videos of him fighting Tony Young, and we're going to talk about you doing forms on stage as well. So talk a little bit about your competitive career. How was it when you started? And then when did you really start to get good? And feel free to brag about some of those big wins you've had.
Yeah. Some of my biggest wins, I kept a few of the ones, we always remember the first grand champion. That's 1981 in Murray, Kentucky. And then we always remember the last grand champion, 2010 at Mike Lantrip's. This one was more so, I was 16 years old, and I knew I had crossed over the line when, I had just beat the guy just beat my dad. And then I came up and I had to go against him, and I beat that guy that beat my dad. And when I looked over there, I went, whoa, he had a look on his face of just, wow, disappointment maybe, I don't know what it was, but, that he couldn't do it, that I did. It was really neat to watch that. I got to do that a couple times, and I kept those certain awards because that's the ones that mean a lot to me. It's the meanings of all that stuff. It's not all the fights. I had many a good fights, and man, I did some crazy things and running my mouth, and I was the John McEnroe kind of, But other than that, that's the thing he taught me: keep your mouth shut. I just couldn't do it as well as he could do it. I get better with age, though. Yes, but no, the Billy Blanks fight, man, all them, several different ones. I brought when we went to Italy with Mafia and the Bradys and some of those guys. That was just memories that we can't. I just think back on them, saying we had such a great time. And Masters Hall of Fame thing, Larry gave me the Ken Eubanks Award a few years ago. There's always a good one, Jackson, when one of my students can go to the U.S. Open and win the U.S. Open. Little Alex Miller is a bomb. He kills it. He's a good athlete no matter what he does. But I just keep the ones that mean something to me, even if I didn't win them, But that's it's been a great ride, and I love what I do. That's the biggest thing. We love what we do. I still get out there. My goal is to fight. There hadn't been as many seniors this year, so I have fought 3 times already. My goal was to fight 20 times this year at some tournaments, and that's what I'm going to do. And I got some new hips a year ago, and they're kicking a little bit, moving a little bit. So, if you love what you do, you better keep doing it, or you will not be able to do it one of these days. That's just the way it is.
Yes, sir. That's awesome. And that's one of the things that even my dad taught me is my dad always said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah.
What I've been doing with karate for my whole carear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome to see you back out there in a way. Your sport karate's Iron Man, still being out there fighting and in the senior division and everything. So I love to see that. You bring up Alex Miller, one of the best young competitors in the world today. He's on our Team Competitive Edge, to go and travel at all the NASCAR tournaments. And you've been able to turn out talent like him for many years now. And it's very impressive for you to be able to do that as an instructor. Before we start getting to the modern period, I want to talk a little bit about back in the day. You mentioned, one of your favorite stories was beating the guy that beat your dad. Was that in the same tournament? So were you and your dad fighting at tournaments at the same time? And were there ever moments where the bracket looked like it was going to wind up being the two of you? How did that work out?
It did. We came down to it came down to us a few times like that. Morgantown, Kentucky, Chester Phelps' old tournament. We came down there, Khalid and Raheem. There was a few people there that were still around to this day that probably remember that, EJ. But, yes, that happened. It come down to us, and he'd either, since I was chasing points, he'd bow out, and just kind of let me roll on. And, I'd definitely take the money when it was there. But it was neat to watch that and do that, with father-son, Jason Tanks. And there's a lot of father-son, duos that have been through the martial arts that are really doing well and still out there to this day.
Yes, sir. That's awesome. One that comes to mind just a couple of episodes ago, we had Richard Plowden on the show, right? So Richard Plowden had a great fighting career. Now both his son and daughter, Morgan and Avery, are both out there being world champions. So it is really cool to see that happen. So we're talking about point fighting. So I want to focus on point fighting first. You were always a lightweight, and many times in the grands would have to go and fight against, the heavyweights. And nowadays, it's split. So just talk a little bit about that experience, being the lightweight, having to fight the heavyweight, and especially back in an era where point fighting was a lot rougher, I think is the best word, when you were kind of in your prime. So just tell a little bit about that. And on top of that, should it still be that way today? Should the lightweight still fight the heavyweight grands winner?
I liked it. I mean, I hated it, and I liked it all in the same motion. That's just, you spoke of Mr. Plowden. I got the chance to get in the ring with him one time out there in California, and them heavyweights hit hard. I always remember him. Be a heavyweight. I can hear his voice now. But I liked it. It was fun. It was just the cat and mouse game. It was because point fighting wasn't, full contact. It felt like it sometime, but it wasn't full contact. But I like the way the lightweights, they got that, open weight. So that's kind of like an all-in-one. Master Chai here in Owensboro, Kentucky, used to say he'd line us all up in a line. I was 16 years old, because back then it was 16 years old to 39, 40 and over. There was only two divisions because my dad was 42 when I was 16, 17. So, there was only two divisions. He'd win the seniors, and that's how it would come down to us at different times. But, if you're 16 years old fighting a guy that's 30 plus years old, and he's got a beard, and you're a baby face looking little kid like me, man, I was scared to death out there. But that's just the heart's got to be like a lion, and that's the way you got to do it. So that's what we did with the point fighting, and it was rougher. Point fighting to then is like disciplining your kid. Then, if I got out of line, my mom or dad tore me up wherever I was at. It didn't wait till you got anywhere. And if you ever get caught doing that now, you're in trouble. And we know that, just as a society and stuff, that's just the way it is, and that's cool too. But I'm glad I got tore up when I did, because it made me the man who I am. And, that's why kids need martial arts right now, Jackson. They need this, whatever this is, because if they don't find this, this will find them. And we see that in daily activities with stuff.
Yes, sir. No, I couldn't agree more. And I love, that analogy there, comparing kind of like modern parenting and what's acceptable and what point fighting was like back in the day and what was acceptable then. Because you go back and you watch some of those videos, late hits were very common. And there's videos that Nasty Anderson picking Tony Young up and throwing him on the ground. I think that was actually a Battle of Atlanta clip, right?
Yes.
So there's the toughness of point fighting back in the day and how sometimes it felt like full contact. When it comes down to the actual gameplay, for lack of a better term, what are some of the biggest differences that you see? Like a certain technique that you see more of or less of? When it comes down to the game of point fighting, what do you see that's one of the, or maybe a few of the biggest differences between those eras?
I think point fighting is kind of like our life now, because it's just out there. And we were more strategized. I see that, they'll call, and it's not that it's not anything. The refs back then would let this stuff go on now till they seen one that would do damage. That's what the one was. So they kind of let it go. And then they'd stop and say, there's the one. We had tic-tacking back and forth, and they'd shake their head, and we'd back up, go again. And they'd shake their head, that ain't good enough. That ain't good enough. And we'd get back in. When they found the one that was good enough, that's when they'd stop us, and that's, they had to jump in the middle of us, that's just because you made sure you got the point, that's just, it was different, like the strenuous I judge it. I corresponded with parenting. It's just the times are different. Friendships, everything is a little different nowadays. The perseverance was stronger back in there because we had to do that. The fighters are smart now because they get away with what they can get away with. If we made them go harder, that one question on there, they say, a lot of point fighters today could adapt to what they did. Jack Felton, Raymond, those dudes they're beasts. Avery, they could adapt, but they get by with what they can get by with. I wouldn't want to go, some of your matches are like 9 to 11. I wouldn't want to get hit with 9 or 11 of anything that Richard Plowden or Scorpion Barrage threw at me.
That's understandable for sure. So that was going to be my next question, is kind of what fighters from today, given those differences, kind of the extra toughness because the judges let more of it happen, they wanted to see the point that would do damage, and given those differences and kind of the, again, style of play, for lack of a better term, are those the fighters that you think would transfer over the best? Your Raymond, Jack, and Avery, are there any others? Because we even see some fighters today that I think have a relatively old school style when you watch like a Cam Dawson fight, or even if you go, Ross doing full contact now, but Ross Levine in a lot of ways sometimes had kind of that old school style with the reverse punch and the defensive sidekick. So is that your list, or are there any others?
Oh man, the list would go on because those guys are super athletes this day and time. I watch them, but they know how to play the rules. They know how to play the game. and they could smack you with the back fist with their open hand instead of a straight punch, or however they do that nowadays. I think the technique, should be a little cleaner than just the recoil on certain things. Sometimes it's a little sloppier than what it would be used to. And that's where I'd look at the judge, they'd be shaking their head no. So we'd go back in without even saying stop or anything. Nope. And we'd keep on fighting the whole time. Then when you got one, and it was supposed to be that it had done damage, if you're diving in with the dive reverse punch, the innovator Nasty Anderson of the dive reverse punch, if you're doing that and barely stand on your feet, there's no way you could do more damage. That's just, you have to be sitting on your punch a little bit more. And that's where the open weight and the new stuff they got out, Pro Point, love it. They're doing a great job with it.
Absolutely. And you bring up, it's interesting because I was going back through some of these archives, I guess it was last week, and I found an article about Nasty Anderson and the MMA Superman punch. And the article was comparing the MMA Superman punch to what they call the California Blitz, which I'm pretty sure is that like dive reverse punch that you were talking about. And so we talk about Nasty Anderson, we talk about these old school fighters. Throughout your career, if you had to pick 3, maybe 4 or 5 of the toughest fighters that you had to face, maybe they were just bad matchups for you, maybe they were just extremely skilled fighters, who were your toughest fighters you had to face?
Now, are you talking about just the lightweight or everybody? Because that lightweight list was long. Pedro, Shaw, Ronald, Tankson, Jesse, Joey, Deloach. And we're all standing around the ring. I went to the Battle of Atlanta, and there were 64 lightweights. They split us up into 2 rings of 32, fought down to 4 and 4 in each, and then put us all in together. So that was just lightweights. That, it was neat to watch that. But, my toughest competitors were K.A. and Pedro and Shaw and the Brady's. And I came in a little later on, got to fight Larry one time. He was a beast. And Jesse Thornton, just all those guys. I fought them on weekly basis, because we would go to Dalton, Georgia, and Ringgold area, United area on Saturday, and then come through Kentucky, drop the school off, and me and Chief would head up to Toledo or Chicago on Sunday where they had their tournaments. And I tell my students, if you're fighting, Saturday here and Sunday there and next week and this week, and then you look back and say, Mr. Student, how many of those people were here at this tournament that were there last week? And my student looks around and says, nobody. Then I said, how many were here that were at the other? Nobody. So you're the only one in the past 2 weeks that was here. No wonder you can get good. That might just mean good in personality and relationships and becoming somebody, because some of these kids that are standing around the ring are going to become promoters one day. And you just never know who it is. You were standing around the ring, and look what you've done. You've innovated a bow staff that is out of this world. Evel Knievel used to jump cars, that's back in the day. And Mike Bernardo used to burn that bow up back in the day. But now they're doing backflips over cars. And now Jackson Rudolph is spinning around 13 times. So this just, the world changes and we innovate. And that's what we got to do to make people, feel good about themselves, have confidence, and go to the top, whatever their top is.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for the kind words. That certainly means a lot to me. You bring up something interesting, just going off script here for a moment, and how often you were competing, talking about going and being one place Saturday, another place Sunday. A lot of competitors, especially at the highest level, they kind of pick and choose their events nowadays. And this is point fighting, forms and weapons. We see very few competitors that are just always out there. I think that the average kind of world top 10 level competitor is doing 13 to 15 events a year. You have your exceptions like a Kevin Walker who's out there fighting anywhere that he could fight, right? But back when you were competing kind of like in what you would call your prime, how many tournaments annually were you doing? What kind of numbers are we looking at?
45 plus.
Wow.
Every week, Saturday and Sunday, there was time. The most I went to 56 tournaments in 1 year. And I missed about 4 weekends, 5, 6 weekends, somewhere in there, but we were going on double. But we went every weekend. My dad was a beast of a driver. He'd go from one to the other. I don't know how he ever did it. He just, when you love something that much, you'll find a way to do it. That's just the way it is. That's the passion, I can't duplicate, is what he had. But I'm going to try. And that's what we do.
I love that. That is awesome. So that's a new challenge for any young competitors watching. Once we get through COVID and all this, if you can do over 45 tournaments in a year, that's going to be really impressive, especially today.
Oh, and I know money is a factor too, but you know what? We just kept going. Money, the dollar was different than the last time. Even though it's more, it's less, it's still, you still got to go and do that, or you just kind of, you don't have that much passion because people are going to spend their money on something, and I read that thing where, I didn't spend my money to travel to tournaments and do all this. I spent my money to be able to build a life for my child through charisma and integrity and character. It just happens to be the vessel of martial arts. Some people get it through other sports.
Absolutely. Now, it's interesting you use that word charisma, because now we're getting to a specific performance that I want to bring up. And once again, after this podcast, y'all can go on YouTube, check this out. 1997, Battle of Atlanta, you were shirtless on stage doing a traditional form. Do you remember that? Because Battle of Atlanta back then was massive. 1997, yeah. Doing forms on stage at the battle, especially since you were somebody known for fighting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Gabe stumbled that day, and Gabe Renaga happened to stumble, and he beat me about 50. I beat him one time. That was it. But other than that, he made a little, and the judges, I guess I was in place to get next, because if you make a stumble, you're out of that in that level. But I got lucky and won one that day, and beat the other guys, and that's pretty neat. I always did forms and weapons and sparring, even though I wasn't elite, like I felt like I was in sparring. I was there, and it got me engaged and out there at the tournament, and it made my day go by shorter. And it got the other judges going, wow, he can do all. Well, that's a well-rounded martial artist, that you can do it all. Michael Smith and a few people are coming out there fighting, and you know what? Kevin Walker can do an awesome kata. Those guys can still, they just choose, they can still do all of it. They're athletes. Yeah. It's just what they choose and focus on to go, you know what, I'm going to relax a little bit. Because as we get older, things diminish. The only guy that I knew can do all them divisions like that. Who's that dude? He does all the divisions. There's a few of them that are in that. Terry Kramer, he's still out there. He can work hard, and still get out there. But he's never really quit. He'll take some time off or do that. But don't just fall out, because if you fall out and you love it, one day you're not going to be able to do it. My dad, he would go to the tournament and he'd take his bag. Every tournament he took his bag. And if he had time, he'd fight. And if he wouldn't, he was judging. He'd just say, go on without me. And he just, pass it on. I'm trying to still find there's probably only one, but Mr. Carnahan and my dad, it was Mr. Carnahan's last tournament in Tacoma, I believe. Him and my dad fought. And I never had video camera, and I never had all that till I got into the adult, till I could buy my own video camera. Nobody had video like they do now. Everybody's got a video in their hand. But I got to dig that up for just the viewers to see Mr. Carnahan's last fight and my dad's fight in Tacoma, Washington. I'm really trying to dig that up. I mentioned it to him. He remembers that.
if you can find that, definitely. That's going to be up on Facebook.
Yeah, and that's coming straight to you.
That is awesome. So you bring up, you name drop Gabe Renaga, and Gabe Renaga, for those of you that don't know, which if you're watching a Sport Karate podcast, you should know who Gabe Renaga is, but I digress. So Gabe Renaga was really one of the pioneers of kind of the open style traditional form, the performance traditional form. You know what I mean? He would often, like with his breathing techniques, he would let out like the woos and stuff like that. He would talk during his form, the low turning horse stances. A lot of people remember Ryan Wells for that. Gabe Renaga was one of the guys who started like that low spinning horse stance. So just talk a little bit about that style of traditional forms, because today the circuit is dominated by the WKF style, what we're going to see in the Olympics. And by all means, that's impressive and it's awesome, but it's not what I grew up with in NASCAR. That's not what I grew up watching with. I wasn't around soon enough to see Gabe Renaga, but I saw like the tail end of E.J. Greer and the way that he would perform traditional forms. I even did a private lesson with E.J. Greer once, learning NP, which is one of his signature forms, right? So just talk a little bit about that style, because even you on stage, well, you were also being a showman with that traditional form. It wasn't the super traditional like we see today. So just maybe talk a bit about that difference.
Yeah, it was just a basic creative form of a couple forms I put together because I might not be able to do a front kick, left leg, right leg. So, certain contests had to be altered just a little bit. But as I come up, you never changed a form. You didn't change no forms. But as modern times have grown, people have twisted around a little bit and put their own little thing with it, which is neat. I like the traditional creative type style that you still had no back flips. As Drew Bisbee always says, no flips and twists and turns, all that, just good traditional moves, but karate style in your own version of that. Yeah, me and EJ me and EJ has been great friends for many years, and he's a great competitor, and I think a lot of him. He's a good one. And I don't know if you've seen that on video, but at 60 years old, he came out a couple years ago, and he is a beast. So if you never stop doing it, that's what you can do. He's actually getting to school going back now full time, I believe.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. So now I know we're jumping around a little bit, but you also brought up the fight between your dad and Larry Carnahan, which again, I really hope that you find that footage and we all get to have a look at that.
I'm going to get it.
Now, I do want to talk about your dad a little bit because the reason that this idea for us to do this podcast came up is in the Larry Carnahan episode. You saw the story that he told about your father, and then that kind of got us talking, and we were like, hey, let's do this, right? And I think that what most of the sport karate community remembers your dad for right now is being the promoter of the Bluegrass Nationals. And many promoters that I've talked to consider him the GOAT when it comes to promoters, right? Like him promoting the Bluegrass was as good as it gets. So let's start there. Just talk a little bit about his work promoting the Bluegrass and kind of what you saw with a front row seat of that growing up.
As I would get up in the middle of the night, some of these things ain't same things. I'm like deja vu because, I eat, breathe, and sleep tournament karate in the months prior to the tournament. I'm in the middle of the night, pen and paper. Even Joey Perry and a couple of guys, I brought my pen and paper. I mean, I'm literally pen and paper through the whole tournament. and I just don't sketch pen and paper. I take it to the tournament also. But I remember him just being up late night, brainstorming on things to do, how to put those divisions, how to do this, how to do that, just to get that exact thing right. Now, is it going to be exactly right? No, but we got to try. And that's what he did. Do your best. Joey Castro always gave me a seminar, don't try your best. You do your best. Trying, I don't try nothing. I do it. And if I fail, that's okay too. But that's, the work ethic is what got him to that. How many hours he put behind all that, going, we just don't work a month before the tournament. It's all year long. You're promoting, shaking hands, talking to people, saying, hey, I'd love to have you there. Being a good center judge so they can say, who's that center judge right there? That's Marty Eubanks. He's at the Bowling Green. He runs a great tournament. Or you could be the one that running your mouth on the sidelines, being mean to judges or saying things they shouldn't say. Who's that butthead over there? That's Marty Eubanks. I ain't going to his tournament. So that's some of the things he taught me to say, keep your mouth shut. I didn't do it as good as the competitor, but I'm getting a little more precise on that every day. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So keep it in line with the Bluegrass. Do you have any favorite stories of like being at Bluegrass and just kind of maybe even roles that you had there helping out your dad? Are there any like really cool Bluegrass stories that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I could. Oh boy, Chris Gaspasa and Jerry Pence, rest in peace. We have some good stories from the Mad Dog Current. I mean, sometimes we would go the party after the tournament was as good as the tournament. And that's just all of us friends going to the, restaurant down at the hotel there or going out somewhere else and all just coming together and having a good time. That was neat. May it be Akeem and Shaw or the promoters standing around. Everybody was there, and that I miss that, the camaraderie of all that. And but the story is that Chris and Jerry got into some mischief and in Louisville, Kentucky, and my dad had to surrender them out of there. That's kind of the way that goes. But there's many stories of Gabe Renaga jump kicking Benihana, one of those round things at Benihana's thing. Gabe did a jump spinning hook kick and kicked it off the thing right there. That could have got us in big trouble. But, that back in the day, it was different, and we all hung together, and we were a family. I'd say at the airport, we'd say, hey, see you next week. And you guys still have that bond. But it was it was an old school bond because it was old school, and it's something we can't – I love the memories and the stuff we have with all that. But there's many, many, many stories of the Bluegrass Nationals and how it was a success. But it goes back to just good hard work, and loving what you do. You can go to a tournament and you can see just the setup and how everything's run if someone put time into it. Or is it just thrown together? You gotta live it and breathe it and love what you do with the martial arts. And that's what we do at the Tournament of Champions and at World Champion Karate,
That's awesome. And I wanted to give a little bit of my personal anecdote about this because Bluegrass Nationals was my first big NASCA tournament that I went to. I came up through RSKC, which we're going to talk about, RSKC and that circuit that you're still running today. But I came up through RSKC, and RSKC's premier event was the NASCA event, the Bluegrass Nationals. And I was able to go, I think it was twice while your dad was promoting it. And I just remember that was the big tournament experience that got me hooked. You know what I mean? People always hear my story about seeing people on stage at the U.S. Open, and that inspired me to be a world champion and everything. But the reason I showed up to the U.S. Open was because I went to Bluegrass Nationals. I don't even remember how I did in forms of weapons, but I remember I got second in my fighting division, which might surprise. This is underbelt. This is not black belt. I was an underbelt, and in the first place fight, I got spin hook kicked in the head 3 times by a kid named Rogelio Gonzalez. So I was not a great fighter, but I found my way to second place. I remember I got, and I still have it like in my childhood room, the Bluegrass trophy with the clock on it, which was representative of the watch that you'd get if you won an adult overall grand, right? And that's what got me hooked. Not just, being able to get the cool trophy and everything, but the entire tournament experience that your dad was able to provide for everybody is what inspired me to keep doing sport karate, to be like, hey, let's go try the Battle of Atlanta. Let's go try the U.S. Open. Let's see what this is like. And so I'm forever grateful for him for providing that for me and giving me that opportunity. And I know that there's so many other kids, especially from Kentucky and from that area, that had that opportunity as well and came to sport karate because of that. And so, we talk about his work ethic. We talk about loving what you do. Let's rewind some. What was it like training under him, being a martial arts student under your dad? What was that like?
See, you guys knew him as Mr. Eubanks. I knew him as Sensei and Dad. But it as long as I did karate and went to that karate school, it didn't matter. As long as I was there dressed out, he didn't care how late I stayed out, what I did, be at that karate school. And I was there. And that transpires going back to work. If I was sick, I showed up to work, man. And if he said, hey, you ain't feeling go, but I showed up to work, especially because it was that karate school, all the other kids, I remember back in it was like the 70s, 79, I believe, we were just freshly opened at the karate school and kids were hauling hay and cutting tobacco, all my buddies there. And I said, man, they're making money and they're doing this and I got to go to karate school. I got to do this and that. And it didn't take me long to figure out once I hauled hay and cut tobacco, I said, where's that dojo at? Because I went straight back there. And that's what the ride was. I said, man, I didn't see the big picture. Of him saying, hey, we're going to build this together and keep this rolling. And that's what I'm going to keep doing forever. May it be the RSKC. We just do a small little circuit. There's not many. And we'll get into that here in a second. But, growing up under him was tough. But, he was one of those guys that, if I beat Billy Blanks or I beat Nasty Anderson or I beat whoever it was or I was fighting whoever, he'd just say, good job. And no emotions. Ken, you're going to win the lottery. Thank you. Ken, you ain't feeling good. Thank you. He was just the same way. I never seen him upset. I seen him get mad and spin up a couple times, but I never seen him mad at people. He just didn't get mad at somebody, even though he didn't like what they did or something happened. he wasn't mad. He'd still go talk to him, and he'd still talk to them good. I never heard him say a bad word about anybody, just me, even if we was mad at him, and that was the cool thing too, of being able to, let things go like that and have that integrity for people. People make mistakes, and we got to keep on rolling with it. Friends don't give up on friends no matter what. Yeah. Absolutely.
I love that. And that's a great segue to my next question. And maybe you've alluded to this a little bit already, but what would you say is the best lesson he ever taught you? Or maybe if there's a story behind that, feel free. I think that all of our audience can agree. We'd love to hear stories about them. So feel free to dive into whatever you had planned. Go ahead and let loose with it.
I hear it to this day, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want, but he didn't leave that he'll get what he wants. He just told me, you help enough people get what they want. Now, it was through the vessel of martial arts, because that's what they were teaching us. Now, that was discipline, respect. Back then, to be tough and rough and to be a good fighter and be tough and say yes, sir, and no, sir, just all those different things. But you got to help enough people get what they want. Now, in this day times, so we can get what we want, because that's what the ultimate goal is to live a good, peaceful life. Not the money, not the stuff. That's all gone. It's have good peace, good integrity, and make a lot of friends throughout the way. That's the way we do it. True, good, honorable friends that you could call and talk to, and if you needed something, whatever it was, that's what you want to be. And that's what my dad was. If somebody needed something, by golly, I've seen him do it numerous times, from people coming from out of town to Kentucky to get some type of rendered aid for my dad. I've seen it from staying at the dojo to whatever else it was. I just witnessed that a lot. And and he didn't even put you'll get what you want. He just said, help enough people get what they want. Now I've heard it through, Les Brown and Jim Rohn and some of the motivational speakers. If you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And in karate days, that's just respect and confidence. We got to give them that. Kids need that this day and time. Yeah.
For sure. No, that's an excellent message there. And so now I want to lighten the mood maybe a little bit, because I think that this is another side that people want to hear too, is you have any funny stories? Just like a great, father-son, great, Mr. Eubanks funny story, just anything that comes to mind.
They that when we was at the karate, we lived upstairs in the karate school, and he was always, if you scared him, he'd end up scaring you. So I seen him 5 o'clock in the morning and barely daylight. Garbage men's bringing these brand new trash cans, delivering them. It was just when they got the big flip up ones, and they're delivering them. It's 35 years ago. We were living at the karate school, and I get down there and I get in the trash can, and he comes down there, and I knew he was shaving up in the bathroom. He comes down, he gets trash can. So he goes down there and he grabs that trash. He noticed it. And by the time he opened that, I popped out of there. And he threw a punch at me. And if I was one split inch closer, he would have popped me. And he always do this, yo's, and he'd let out this loud ki. And I put my head, it's me, and I was in the trash can. But I tried to scare him, but I almost got busted in the mouth. But there's many stories as father, son. I pulled up karate school. 2 guys was kind of road raging on me. I pulled up and, pulled up in the parking lot of the back door and run in the back door. And when I run in the back door, he was coming out the front door. Other dudes running after me. Well, they run kind of into him. And the stature of him and just his demeanor and hands and stuff and backed up, he could just make peace. Because I think if you've seen how big and just his demeanor, all that, he was like, sorry, sir, you just had that. And he wasn't, and he let out a confident, not a cockiness. I never mistaken his confidence for cockiness with him. That was the big thing. But as dads and sons, there's many funny stories. He took my feet out from underneath me several times, Jackson. I can't tell you some of these stories. But there probably is a few people out there that might know him. But he did what he needed to do, be a good dad and a good provider. And he taught me something that nobody can ever take from me. We didn't work out. The old school Olympic, we didn't go that way. And things didn't work out the way that should have been. But you know what? I wanted that to go on and wanted that to be our thing. Now it was a new chapter in life, and that's just the way things happen. We keep on persevering through life. Especially nowadays. We showed it in this past 16 months of what we do. We're strong, and we're going to persevere, and we're going to keep going. The main thing, we're going to teach karate and build these kids up to be good characters.
Right. Absolutely. No, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing some of those stories. I know a lot of our audience will certainly appreciate that. And then now you're following in your father's footsteps. You own a successful school that's created several champions, and you're also the promoter of the Tournament of Champions in Bowling Green, Kentucky, a very successful event. And actually, you guys just had your 15th one not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, right? So just tell us a little bit about that and how it went.
It was a great turnout. Had a bunch of competitors. I try not to say numbers. We have a good tournament, and we just keep pumping them through. And if we can have a big one or a small one, it's going to be a great competition. And we're going to have successful champions be built that day, and maybe somebody, since I do it, I have had a few people make some bigger decisions than that. We won't go into that because I do have it in a church. And I always think, man, where did you finally get saved or have that experience? I was at Marty Eubanks' karate tournament. Whoa. So that has happened right there in the baptistry after the tournament one day. A couple of years ago, we did that. And I thought, man, that's pretty neat, because that's the memories that we can't ever buy, or we just got to share them with people. And that's what I want, to have good memories throughout your life. But the RSKC is just a small little circuit. There's been many champions come out there, Braden and Davion and Logan, 3 of my students. They're great competitors, a wrecking force regionally. Now, nationally, they don't get to get out much. There's 2 levels. You can be a great fighter and then go to there and get smoked, because those dudes are elite fighters. There is a difference, and just like if you go to your local little dojo tournament over here and we go, they go, wow, you guys are awesome. Well, there's people better than us.
Yes, sir, for sure. And, you guys ran this tournament as part of kind of the first wave of tournaments that are coming back from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so far, I think that a lot of the sport karate community is thrilled to see great turnouts. And your event was another one that had a great turnout. So just maybe speak a little bit as a promoter about some of the challenges there and how kind of the public safety side of things went and everybody doing what they needed to do. How did all of that shake out for you?
It was great. The church is immaculately clean. I mean, they have a staff that does all that, and they're having services too, and I tell people, if you wanted to wear a mask, we did a mask. If you're not competing, keep your mask on. It was kind of preference. Some people can't breathe with a mask on, so if not, keep your distance. I mean, there's things we do have to take precaution with all this. However, we still wanted to live our life. I just escaped, as last year, 2020, the week Saturday, they closed Monday, everything. So as you speak of that, I'm very blessed to just have got it out last year, and then to come back this year with a successful event. That's pretty neat. And that's just a big blessing to me and my hard work and my passion that I love for martial arts. It's going to be okay. Even if we didn't have it, it's still going to be okay. That's just, I'm not going to get spin up, and I'm not going to worry about things that aren't, going to happen. I tell my kids this too. Don't worry about something that's not even going to happen, and then if it is going to happen, you're worried about it because it was too worrisome and it's not even as bad as you thought. So, have that chi. My chi is right here at my dojo, talking about martial arts. Then I'm in my chi. Only thing could be better than that is a room full of little kids with gis on. Then I would go, yes. When that first little kid walks across and I can see him turn that little corner right there with a smile on his face, then I go, I'm at my chi. Thank you, Lord. Because that's where we're at. You said it earlier, your dad said it. He is exactly right. We always hear that. If you love what you do, you never worked a day in your life. And man, I love what I do. It gets better every day.
Awesome. And anybody in the area, I highly, highly, highly recommend when they have the 16th annual Tournament of Champions that everybody goes and checks that out, because just like Mr. Eubanks is saying, coming from somebody who's not the promoter, it is an awesome event, and I highly, highly encourage anybody in the area to go and check it out. One more promoter question, just because it popped in my head, and maybe this has never even occurred to you, but I've got a feeling it might have. Have you ever thought about bringing back the bluegrass? Has that ever been something that was on your radar, or what's the vibe there?
I have. I've thought long and hard. I've prayed long and hard about it. And I feel like when the time is right, and I've had some people that have tons of respect for me that I have for them that has stepped up to say, because it takes a lot to do that. You got Larry Carnahan, John Ward, you got Mike McCoy, you got big dogs in there. Just, I don't know if I could task that by myself right off the bat. I might need some help with that, and I can't mention no names, but people that I respect that are in the martial arts world, it said, man, we'd love to see that come back. But God willing, that's going to happen one day. I just don't know when. Things have gotten a little crazy. But me and Mr. Carnahan have talked about that. I'm going to bring it back one day. I am. I just don't know when. I feel like the time is right. God will lay it in my hands and said, man, here it is. Because that's just the way he's done with everything. For me, having to get in the car business and have kids, and man, he knows the pictures, not me. So I'm just going to ride it out and say, you know what? I love what I do, and I'm going to come in this karate school every day. I'm going to be dressed when the first kid gets here, because that's what my dad taught me also. He said, you make sure you're in that uniform when that first kid comes. Don't come in here 90 miles an hour throwing your stuff on. You be dressed, ready to go when that first person arrives at that dojo, because we're just talking about kids. What a respected job that a parent would drop their kids off with you for an hour or two or three and go somewhere else and totally trust you. That is huge. Because I know, especially nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Right, for sure.
Thanks to all the parents. Thanks to all the parents that trust me with their precious kids on a daily basis. That means the world to me. We're going to build them up, and we're going to keep them strong.
Yes, sir, for sure. And as a competitor and as a fan of sport karate, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and really, really hope that Bluegrass Nationals happens sooner than later, because that would be truly special. And I think you can do it. I got your back on that one, and I think you could pull it off. If anybody could do it, I think that it's you. But I digress. So now I do want to talk a little bit more about RSKC, because you said you guys still got tournaments going, and it was a huge part for me getting my start in sport karate, and so many others as well. There's even some names that, the mainstream sport karate audience might not even know about. I remember competing against Austin Cowan and how talented of a competitor he was, and then others that went on to the NASCA circuit. When I was a kid, I competed against Jessie Pellegrino all the time. She went on to represent Straight Up and compete nationally. So just talk about kind of your memories of throughout the years of RSKC and, some of the top talent that it's been able to produce.
Man, it started off being KAMA, Kentucky Association of Martial Arts, back in the early 80s. And Mr. Landtrip and my dad got together and started something, and he went to the Waco stuff, and my dad went on with NASCA. And now it's still going to this day. I've taken a break for all those, this year is just a blanket year as far as that. We're going to come strong in 2022. Donnie Michaels and Will Snyder and Chuck Reynolds, Jesse Thornton, Tony Young. That's some of the promoters that just kind of come on board with me. And we just do point things. And Miss Augerber helps me with all the points. It's just a small show. It's nothing big, but you know what? I love what I do. I don't, if it's going to get big, good, it'll get big. Then I'll need some help. But other than that, we're just going to give out some jackets and some nice awards and have a great time. We did a workout in January here at the school and a little banquet that we do. Of course, some of that's been put on hold for just a little bit. But we're going to be back in 2022. And, we go in with the AK and the Battle and the Diamonds and the Capital. Those guys are, gracious enough to let me put that on the circuit. Because not everybody could just put their names on their calendar and say, hey, we're support. You got to be careful what you do with that with liability issues. But those guys are friends of my dad that I would, that they have tons of respect for. And matter of fact, Larry and Dennis Brown and Muhammad, when I went on to my 7th degree, I had nobody to test me. My dad tested me, but their names are on my diploma. Because that was 3 of my dad's best friends right there would be Dennis Brown, Larry Carnahan, and Muhammad Jahanvash. Okay. Not to mention all the other great promoters also, but that was just the 3 that, he talked highly about. And we're there, through all that times right there. Anyway.
That's so cool. That is awesome. And for those wondering, RSKC, I don't think I ever said it, Regional Sport Karate Circuit. Again, it's where I got my start. They put on great events. I always loved competing in those tournaments. And truly, it's what made me who I am as a competitor when I went on and did NASCA and all of that. And you mentioned, RSKC has many ties to several NASCA tournaments and the promoters and things of that sort. So on specifically the RSKC side of things, just for the audience, what are some upcoming events to be on the lookout for?
Jesse Thornton is supposed to, there's a few that's on hold, right there, but I know upcoming prior this year, they're just kind of doing their tournament. I didn't want somebody to obligate and say, yeah, let's do it, Marty, and then have a bad event or something happen, So I just said, hey, let's just have a little, go out year. I'm going to compete a bunch this year. If you've got judges, good, use them. Let me just watch my students and compete for 1 year. That way next year I'll work my butt off all day. I'll do what I do because I love being out in the center of those. But, next year Will Schneider's got a nice little 4-tournament circuit that he does. He rates a couple of those. Donnie Michaels is in Kokomo, Indiana. Nice traditional tournament. Jesse Thornton, Ringo, Georgia. Chuck Reynolds in Knoxville. Tony Young in Atlanta. And, of course, 459. And there's a few others around regionally that I'm not mentioning that I haven't talked with yet. But those are tournaments that also have been around for many years. And when you go to Wheeler's Karate down there in Knoxville, you better be ready to fight. Or when you go to United, you better be ready to go. Kind of the RSKC was always known as the fighting circuit. Not that it, because it was had, not that there was a formed circuit, but they had it was good. They were always known for the fighters. I know there's other circuits out there, and my friends with the Pro Max circuit, they're killing it, doing great stuff with that. They love it all too. But I noticed that sometimes, they have a great quality of forms, weapons, and extreme stuff. So there's kind of to each his own right there with that. We support those guys, and we went up to Joey's. Joey's had a great event. Icon of a martial artist, as young as he is. He's not, but man, he does some big things with that, and he's got his act together too.
Absolutely. And you bring up the fact that RSKC was kind of historically a fighting circuit, just a cool little story before we wrap things up here. I remember, because when I was a kid, when I won my first U.S. Open, and I believe the second one as well, it was a big part of my form, was the palm spin behind the back, the fantail, which today people are like, everybody can do that, right? But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. You know what I mean? Like, that was a big deal back in the day. And I remember I learned that move on the RSKC circuit because Justin Johnson, who's on Team Kicks, which was one of the first teams that I ever looked up to when Team Kicks was around. Not Team Kicks. They had like a purple, gold, and black uniform, if I remember correctly, right? They might still be around for all I know. But anyway, so Justin Johnson, he fought, and he still fights. He just recently fought on the pro point card that I commentated on, right, and represented himself well there. And I remember Justin Johnson, he also was a bow guy, and he's the one who taught me how to do that palm spin behind my back. You know what I mean? And so it was those RSKC fighters that were partly responsible for Jackson Rudolph learning a few bow tricks early on. But anyway, just a fun little story there. But, sir, thank you so much for your time. I think we might have just lost your camera. If you can come on back for us. But I think that you could still hear me. So any closing thoughts or comments that you want to share with our audience here? Gotcha. There we go. You're back. So anyway, closing thoughts or comments. What do you got, sir?
Ask me again, Jackson.
Yes. Can you hear me?
All right, talk to me.
There we go. So I was just getting to last question. Any closing thoughts or comments from you that you want to share with our audience before we head on out of here?
Let me get you back on. No, I appreciate you having me on, and I thank the martial arts world for just giving me a good life in martial arts. That's I didn't know all that was going to happen when you're a 6-year-old kid and you're just going to do karate. So I tell some of my students, some of my black belts, you never know where this is going to take you. So if you love what you do, now, if you want to go to school and be a tradesman or do whatever, that's cool too. But if you love this type of thing, if you hang into it for a lifetime, man, it'll take you beyond your expectations. That's just my thought.
I love that. Well, once again, thank you so much, sir. I feel like every time you said something, I was sitting here saying, I love that, or that's awesome, or everybody should listen to that, right? And it's so much wisdom, both from you and sharing the stories about your dad and just over your years of competition. So grateful that our audience has an opportunity to hear that. And so I hope if anybody's tuning in at the end of the stream here, make sure that you rewind this thing, go back and listen to some of these stories, because it's been really awesome. Thank you so much to our audience for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, drop some comments down below and be sure that you share it so a lot of your friends can see it too. This has been episode 64 of the Jax Rudolph podcast, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, man.